Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call the meeting of the Zoning Subcommittee to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Chairman Milanazzo.
Here.
Councilor Belanja.
Here.
Councilor Kennedy.
Here.
3 present.
Thank you. Let me welcome everyone this evening to the Zoning Subcommittee, and let me read the notice. An ordinance amending code of the City of Lowell, Massachusetts, with respect to Chapter 290 thereof entitled Zoning, by extending the traditional mixed-use zoning district to include all parcels located in Lowell with frontage on the northerly side of Rogers Street, as well as the entirety of 39 Whitehead Avenue, 550 Douglas Road, and 458 Wentworth Avenue in Lowell, all of which are presently zoned regional retail. What I'd like to do, if it's okay with my colleagues on the zoning subcommittee, unless you have any questions early on, I was going to ask Adam Bakey to really give an update as to where this whole process is. As you all know, the last City Council, 2012-2013, actually took this issue up, and as well as the Planning Board, I believe, and it's gone back and forth, and it's only proper that it's back before the zoning subcommittee under the new council to really talk about where we're at, and the fact that back in December, I believe a proposed transitional retail zoning district was talked about at the City Council. Unfortunately, when it was supposed to be debated, I believe that last meeting was canceled due to a snowstorm. So if it's okay with my colleagues, unless you have comments or questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to recognize Adam Bakey, our Assistant City Manager for Planning and Development. I'd also like to recognize City Councilor Rita Mercier is here. Thank you, Councilor Mercier. And Eric Slagle, who heads up the Division of Inspectional Services. Thank you, Eric, for being here. Adam?
All right. Well, thank you, and good evening. I'll just, I think I will try to be somewhat succinct because I think the real focus here of this evening is to try to hear from some of the interested parties and get what we, I think, want to work toward is some sort of, as close as we can get to some kind of a consensus around what the appropriate proposed zoning in this general vicinity should be. But just for a little bit of context to remind everyone how we got here, because it has been a little while since we last met. Not what anyone intended, but Mother Nature has been not kind to meeting schedules this winter. The council was presented with a proposal that came from the planning board in the last session to rezone a section of Rogers Street from the current regional retail to the traditional mixed use. And as you can see, this is the existing zoning today. And as you can see, there is an area of traditional mixed use at the, I guess, the western end of a stretch of Rogers Street in the Belvedere neighborhood. And the planning board proposal was basically just to pull the boundary line between those two a little bit further to the east toward Tewksbury along 38. But when that was brought forward, a number of the business owners and other property owners in the area who would have been affected by the proposed change attended a couple of city council meetings and voiced their concerns about some of the aspects of what was proposed and expressed a preference, if those were the only two options, to leave the zoning boundaries where they are today. However, there also were an equal number of neighbors who live in the vicinity of the area who were advocating pretty strongly for the proposal that the planning board had suggested. The council referred the matter to the zoning subcommittee, and we had, what I thought was a very positive, constructive meeting at the beginning of December, where we discussed the possibility that we were not limited necessarily to those two choices, each of which clearly had some reason for concern from at least some of the interested stakeholders. And that perhaps there was a way to come up with a third option, which would be basically a new, for lack of a better term, not very good name at the moment, transitional retail zoning district that could be applied to the area, that could capture many of the characteristics that the property owners wish to preserve about the existing zoning, and perhaps enhance it in some respects for them, and also create some new parameters that would help to protect some of the things that the neighbors feel very strongly they want to protect about their neighborhood and about the business district that is directly abutting and interacting with their neighborhood. So what we discussed was that we would be soliciting from the interested parties their thoughts about what the vision for the area really should be and is, and then begin to talk about what that transitional retail zoning district might look like in order to achieve that vision. And this is not meant to be conclusive this evening. This is sort of a summary of what I have heard so far from interested parties through emails. We actually sent a letter to the property owners asking for their input, and we received some letters back from folks. And there was a pretty broad range of opinion expressed, but these seem to be a series of points that were, while nothing is 100% consensus, there was a pretty strong majority that seemed to support these ideas. That continued redevelopment in this area will help to transform it into a more walkable commercial district that serves the surrounding neighborhood as a primary audience and regional traffic secondarily. The private development activity will be welcomed, but will be managed to minimize traffic impacts, particularly from auto-oriented retail drive-through businesses and deliveries from large trucks. That the current pattern of smaller buildings on smaller lots will be reinforced, and the consolidation of parcels into larger development tracts would be discouraged. That the area will act as a transitional buffer area between the obviously auto-oriented and truly regional retail district along Route 38 closer to the highway and the residential areas that directly abut this area. And that commercial property owners would generally retain, or in some cases enhance, the development rights that they currently enjoy over the property that they've invested in the area. And in order to begin to think about how we might achieve that vision, we took a look during the month of December at the existing zoning and thought about some of the different areas and things that we regulate, and came up with, again, a meant to be a starting point for the conversation, not a conclusion. Some suggestions about what we might do to create this new zoning district to achieve that vision. And I normally, when I do a PowerPoint, I don't read every word of it, but I know how small that type is, and it's not easy for everybody to see, so I was going to quickly kind of read through these or summarize them. That in terms of use regulations, that this district would allow most commercial, office, service, and retail uses by right if they're smaller than 5,000 square feet. Again, that idea of keeping with the smaller building concept, but again, supporting the fact that the property owners, commercial property owners, want to be able to operate their businesses and expand them or replace them with a minimum amount of discretionary permit process. That residential uses might be allowed as part of mixed-use developments in the area, and this would be a bit of a change from the existing zoning, but it would help to reinforce that idea of a more walkable, more neighborhood-oriented feel if you could incorporate some residential into mixed-use projects in the area. That you would limit automotive uses, allowing service stations, repair garages, and car washes with a special permit to make sure that they were compatible with the surrounding area. But you would prohibit larger things like car dealers and less sort of more onerous uses like auto bodies, shops, or tow lots, or more industrial types of automotive uses wouldn't be allowed in this area. You would allow the drive-throughs for banks and pharmacies with a special permit, but prohibit other drive-throughs in the area. And that was a particularly important issue for some of the abutting residents, some real concerns about what you would do to the character of the area if you start to have proliferation of drive-throughs. An important point to make, however, is that there are two properties in the area in question that currently have drive-throughs for a food service business. And as a consequence of that, those properties are grandfathered and would be allowed to continue to have drive-throughs for food-oriented businesses, even if the nameplate on the business changes. If it goes from a Wendy's to a Burger King or whatever, they would be allowed to continue as a grandfathered use, even if new properties are not allowed to introduce new fast food drive-throughs in the area, if that were the change. Obviously, we would continue to prohibit industrial uses. I don't think anyone sees an industrial future to this area. And we would continue to allow the protected institutional and other uses as we're required to by the Commonwealth. We don't have any local discretion over. With respect to dimensional standards, this would, our initial thoughts, again, based on the feedback we've received so far, is that we would generally follow a lot of the current TMU dimensional standards, which actually allow for more development opportunity on smaller lots than the RR does, because the RR has a couple of specific dimensional parameters, including a very deep rear yard setback that makes it actually very difficult to develop smaller lots and encourages the consolidation of lots into larger lots. Whereas the TMU, it really has dimensional standards that are designed for smaller lots and to allow smaller lots to be developed. But we would, and that would again discourage the further aggregation of parcels, which was one of the things people were very concerned about. But actually, I think it would actually increase some of the opportunity for the existing property owners in terms of the options for their properties. And it would, in the end, it would encourage building and site designs that reinforce the kind of walkable neighborhood folks are looking for. And one area that I think the TMU might be a little bit limiting relative to the existing development patterns out there is that the TMU has a maximum setback built into it of 8 feet, which basically is designed to encourage people building new buildings to build them up near the sidewalk, which can be a very positive thing for, again, creating that kind of walkable neighborhood business district feeling. But in an area where that is very much not the norm today of the existing relatively modest scale commercial developments in that area, you have almost none that would comply with that. And there are ways of coming up with a more walkable environment that deal more with landscaping and sort of parking lot design standards than necessarily forcing the buildings up to the sidewalk, where it would be a little out of place relative to the fact that you're not going to see every lot change all at once. So that might be an area where we wouldn't necessarily want to follow the TMU standard, and we might want to be a little more flexible than the TMU is in that respect. This is just a probably absolutely impossible to read chart, so we'll go over it and pass on quick. But this is the dimensional table in the zoning code today. The orange highlight is the regional retail, and you'll see particularly that 40-foot rear yard setback, which is the fourth column from the right, as well as it caps the floor area ratio of development at 2.0, which could, even though it has no height limit and no maximum stories limits, that FAR limit actually would have the effect of generating a bit of a sort of cap on how much development intensity you can have. In the TMU district, you'll see we actually break it out by different uses: single-family dwellings, residential dwellings, and then all other uses. And you'll see that when you get down to the all other uses, which is basically the suite of commercial uses, you have a fairly limited and fairly permissive set of dimensional standards, except I have highlighted in blue that maximum setback, which I think is probably not quite appropriate in this context. Signage was another area where we actually heard quite a bit from some of the existing business owners with some very real and legitimate concerns, because signage is actually something that tends to turn over and change more frequently than the use of buildings does. And there was some concern about how the regional retail allows certain sign types that the TMU that had been proposed did not, and it would have made it very, very difficult for some of the business owners in the area to change their signage and stay in compliance with zoning without having to go through a special permit process to work with their grandfathered rights or whatever they may be. So essentially our suggestion is that, generally speaking, this proposed district would likely follow mostly the RR signage standards to, again, preserve the rights that the businesses have. And with respect to some, the neighbors' sensitivity there, it's important to point out that at present, the exact same sign standards apply to the neighborhood business district zone, which is the one that's in place on, say, Bridge Street or Couples Square or other similar places in the city. So one can work within those standards and have a very walkable neighborhood scale business district. I would be remiss to not point out, however, that there is a larger effort underway in the planning department right now in response to a separate motion of the last city council asking for a more comprehensive look at the city's sign code. So whatever we might do in the context of this, if this is ahead of that, may see further refinement as part of that larger sign code project. And then parking is another area where the zoning code does regulate and actually plays a big role in how the sort of character and feel of an area plays out, as well as what's sort of possible in the marketplace in terms of commercial development. And our suggestion would be that minimum parking requirements would be set similar, consistent with other neighborhood-oriented districts rather than the regional retail standards, which actually require considerably more parking than is necessarily appropriate or conducive for the kind of walkable area that people are looking for, and frankly exceeds in most of the properties in this area in question. They are not necessarily compliant with the existing regional retail parking standards. Many of them are grandfathered, having been pre-existing prior to that. There are a couple that are compliant, but most have insufficient parking, but most would be compliant with the neighborhood-oriented standards. One thing, though, that I think would be important to change is not so much what we require in terms of the quantity of parking, but we might want to be very thoughtful about what landscaping is required and how we design parking areas, because that probably would play a bigger role in creating the kind of environment that I think the neighbors are advocating for there than counting how many parking spaces you do or don't have on the lots. And that's kind of a quick summary of where, what we have digested of what we have heard so far. And again, I don't mean for that to be in any way the definitive path we're going down unless we hear from the folks that are assembled here today that that's the right path. What I hope we would be able to use this time for is to hear from folks and then incorporate that feedback into DPD then coming back with another sort of round of proposal to work with this committee on. I should point out, it's not news to you, but this is also probably the last meeting that I will be at, and the main reason, or a major reason I have Eric Schlegel here with me, is that Eric will be the person who will be taking over after my last day at the city is Friday, so after that, Eric will be the person who will be working with this subcommittee and the council on this project.
Okay. Thank you, Adam. Councilor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could, just one question before we move on. The more comprehensive plan regarding signage for the whole city, how far along is that and when should that be completed? Do you have an idea on that?
Well, we have a team of staff that have been working on that. The person who had been leading it was Aaron Clausen, who actually left the city to go work for the town of Beverly in January. I think they probably got, would you say, maybe 50 to 60% of the way there prior to his departure, and the rest of the team is picking that up. It was our intent prior to all of the sort of transition that's now underway in terms of staffing to try to bring something in for the council before the end of this fiscal year on that topic. I think realistically, it will probably be take a little bit longer than that, given the staff situation that DPD is under right now.
And just finally, the team. How big is the team and who's in charge of the team now that Aaron has left?
Well, once again, Eric here is the guy in charge for that, and the team includes the city's design planners, and then the staff that works to support the various land use boards, working together to try to develop that.
Okay.
Thank you.
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
I do have a question, if I could. If I just went. Did the stakeholders receive a copy of the memo that you sent to the city manager back in December entitled Proposed Traditional Retail Zoning District?
It's been a while, I don't recall. I believe that I had emailed that to the folks that I have email addresses for, which I know is not everyone who's in attendance tonight or everyone who's interested in this issue, and I encourage people to forward it to others. So I think some people have seen it, but it'd be pretty certain that not everyone has seen it.
Okay. Those of you that have not seen it, we'll be more than happy to make a copy available to you and get that information to you. Councilor Mercia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was my question as well. It's one thing to have a third option, and I'm very happy that you're thinking, because there's always a compromise that could be in place. This sounds good to me, but then again, I'm not the person affected by it. So this meeting this evening is just to hear about a third option. Nobody's voting to support this or change into the third option or TMU zone or whatever. So I'm very concerned that information is distributed to everyone that abuts it. You know, even the people that took the time to come here that are not abutting it per se, but people that support the the RR zone being changed into the TMU zone. I want everybody to be aware of what's happening, and so that's my concern right here. And let's say that people were supporting the third option. A gentleman is asking us through a letter that he believes that the variance change, the zoning change, they would have to apply for another variance to change lighting and signage or whatever. Would this be true, do you think? Because I wanted to know that as well.
Well, it's impossible to answer that without seeing exactly what is proposed, to answer it definitively. But what I believe that that is a letter that I think I received yesterday by email as well. And the concern there was that some of the signage that's allowable under the regional retail that exists today would not be allowable if it were changed to TMU, as was the proposal before the council. And what we are suggesting today is that if we seek, again, a third option, that we would likely incorporate the same or very, very similar signage standards as applied to the regional retail district in that third option. That if that were the case, if that was what the council ultimately did, then the rights that those property owners enjoy today would remain essentially the same with respect to signage. That doesn't mean they can do any sign they want anywhere.
Right.
But it does mean the signs that are legal today would continue.
So my suggestion is this PowerPoint that you presented, I would like it in the form of paper and distribute it somehow, and how are they going to get it? Because I'm concerned, and I really mean that these people that took the time to be here, every one of them should have this. In fact, I wish it would have been available tonight so that they could digest this. I don't think that they should be deciding right now that this is a good thing or whatever.
Well,
So how are we going to do this? I need these people.
Yeah, the PowerPoint was an attempt to make available the content of the memo that was provided to the city council in December, and then again to the new city council in early January, that details exactly the same information. That memo was also emailed, I believe I emailed it to the interested stakeholders prior to the scheduled December 17th meeting. I freely admit that there are almost certainly people who are interested in this who I do not have the email addresses for, so they did not receive it directly from me, but I did encourage the parties who did receive it to circulate it more broadly. What we can do this evening, though, we can certainly very quickly make copies of the memo that we have and pass it out to anyone here in the
That'd be a good
room who
thing.
would be interested
Are
in
we
that.
calling this third option the transitional retail district?
At the moment, we don't have a better name for it yet.
So it's kind of like the TRD zone,
Yep,
kind of that. So,
Dated the 13th of December, correct?
yep, yes.
okay, well, there probably are people here that don't have this, and I'd like them to have it.
I think that's great.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Kennedy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just following up on what Councilor Mercy said. Last year, when we were taking this matter up, some of the concern from the people that were, that lived within the district to be changed, thought the communication could have been stronger than what it was, or better than what it was. And so the communication with everybody is, and Eric's left, and I understand that you're going to be handing this off to him. So maybe you can convey to him that we should at a minimum include all the property owners within the district and all the businesses within the district. And it might not be a bad idea if somebody's got a pad or something, if we just sort of passed it around here so that everybody that's here this evening can get notified. Do we have anything like that we can do that?
I think our clerk has a pad.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's a paper on the podium with the pen.
Okay, that'd be helpful to pass that
So
around.
if you'd like to be notified, if you end up signing that at some time or other, then everybody be notified all the time.
Thank you.
That's great.
Let me also recognize that Councilor Leahy has joined us. Thank you, Councilor Leahy, for being here. What I'd also like to do before we open it up to the public to comment is to get into the record. We do have a couple of letters that the subcommittee received this evening. I do see that the Barretts are here, but I just wanted to note that Richard Barrett did send us a letter, and just the first sentence, he's writing in opposition to the change in zoning in the Rogers Street corridor. He owns property at 660 Rogers Street and 39 Whitehead Avenue, and his property is currently zoned regional retail, so we'll get that into the minutes of the meeting. And then we received another letter from Mr. Stephen Hatton at 35 Harlan Avenue, and he states that this letter comes to you as an endorsement of the proposal to redefine the zoning designation eastward along the section of Rogers Street between Berkeley Avenue and Phoenix Avenue, replacing the existing regional retail zoning designation. So we'll also enter that into the record as well. With that being said, any questions?
Yeah.
Councilor Belanger?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few comments that, going into this, I understand, on both sides of things, both the council, the businesses, and the residents have really endured a lot here. This was a year and a half, 2 years in the making, and in the end, nothing was reached. And I'm sure it's frustrating, so let this all be a fresh start for all of us here. We have a new subcommittee, and we're all open-minded to the changes that, to make everybody satisfied here. And there's one word I can use, it's compromise. It seems like on the residential side, their fear is big box retail coming in with drive-throughs and encroaching on their property, and it's understandable. And on the commercial side, on the commercial property, they're concerned about their use being restricted, and you have to understand their concerns as well. So going into this, it's important that we hear from both sides, go back and forth in dialogue, and to come up with a final solution here. A third option, I think, is a great idea, Adam, because no one seemed to be pleased with the other two. So I think it can be created through a series of, we're not going to find an ultimate solution this evening, but I look forward to the dialogue, hearing from both sides what you're looking for, so we can, in turn, come up with solutions. So I look forward to the dialogue here this evening and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Belanger. I guess that would be a good segue into opening it up for those that would like to address the subcommittee. Attorney Plunkett, if you could just, please state your name and address.
Members of the committee, David Plunkett, in office 151 Warren Street in Lowell, representing Sage Bank. Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, because I know I did receive an email, and there's a reference to the northerly side of Rogers Street, which, if that's what the intent is, then that addresses a concern of,
I think Adam's going to pull up a map here. And are we talking just the northerly side, Adam?
Sorry, the notice that went out, and this matter is still before the council officially as consideration of the amendment that was brought forward by the planning board the second time round. And that version was to convert largely the northerly side of Rogers Street, as well as the nursing home property, which is that sort of large property that extends down to the south toward the LI district, and the Wendy's property, and then the northerly side of that sort of finger. I forget exactly how far it went. I think it went to Buttman. Maybe it went as far as Douglas, to the TMU. Now, I think while that is technically the topic that is before you, I think everyone involved in the discussion by December had moved to a place where we were looking for something other than that particular answer. So at present, as much as the parameters of what this alternate zoning district might be are very much still up for discussion, exactly where the boundaries get drawn is also, frankly, still up for discussion.
Okay.
Well,
Attorney Plunkett.
with that, then, Mr. Chairman, I'll reiterate a position that I have stated on behalf of my client in previous hearings. From the perspective that, Sage Bank's property is at the corner of Rogers and Phoenix Avenue. That on one side of Phoenix Avenue is a gas station, the other side of Rogers Street is the Milan Pizza, other side of Douglas Road, opposite side is the commercial area going into car zones, and to the rear and adjoining it is the light industrial area. So whenever you're talking about a change, the question is, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of that change? And if the process that was started here was from, the concerns of neighborhood areas that were fearful of potential encroachment onto their residential use, it doesn't seem to make sense to disturb and disrupt those properties on the other side of the street, especially as you move down towards the Phoenix Avenue area, because of the fact that when you're talking about, well, we're changing, and what we'd like to do is add in, potential benefit of, mixed residential use. But, that mixed residential use, maybe on the other side might be a benefit, but on this other side would make no sense. From the perspective of zoning planning, that if you're adjoining a light industrial use, the problems with the zone changes is always the conflict from one zone into another. So now if you switch over and then you say, well, we're going to introduce a potential residential use over on this southerly side of Rogers Street, southerly side in the area of Phoenix, you're increasing the conflict. You're increasing the conflict between potential residential use and heavy industrial use. And the reality is, when you have a property owner like Sage Bank, I just heard today that I think that, the number of employees, don't quote me on it, but, I think that they're up close to 200 employees now. So this is a great entity in the city of Lowell, that they're, a real participant, they're making investment, they're a source of employment, and they've done some very nice work there at the Rogers and Phoenix Avenue property. And it's, when they go in, they do an analysis based on, what was allowed, what the uses are, and certainly there are things that are very valuable that might not be surface apparent. Things such as the signage, which was a great concern that Mr. Backey did indicate that they recognize that that's a concern because of the impact and importance of that to a business in that type of area. But, the height allowances and things of that sort, it's all, they made an analysis based on the parameters, regardless of what the name is. I know regional retail people say, well, box development, but that's not what they look at. They don't look at the name. They look at the parameters of allowed uses, density, height, signage, things of that sort, and that's how they analyze the value of that property to them. So I guess I want to make the point that our position would still be that, understanding the thrust of what you're trying to do, but, this area is really not important relative to addressing the concerns of the neighborhood, question the intrusion. That this is a very busy area, heavy, light industrial to the back, and there are trucks going down that, the Phoenix Avenue on a regular basis to get down to that light industrial use in the back, which is currently, it's not prospective, it's in existence, it's there, and could potentially expand, and you're just going to increase the tension between the zones. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney Plunkett. Councilor Kennedy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just point out, Attorney Plunkett, that beside the bank are 3 properties that would be very conducive to mixed use. The way they are now. They're basically residential properties that are used for offices or whatever, but those properties right beside the bank on the southerly side would be very conducive to a mixed use. But I think really if we're going to get anywhere, that what we should be focused on is that the reason that we're here is to try to come up with a new district. And so what at least I would be interested in hearing is, what can everybody live with, or what's important about your existing district? I think that what we want to do is try to create a new district that's going to protect the neighborhood as much as we can, but still allow as much property rights to the people that have own property in the district right now. And so that's really what the focus should be. It isn't going to be that helpful if 7 people get up and say they want to keep it the way it is, and 7 other people get up and say they want to change it to the new way. I think what we want to do is try to find that common ground and that a common area, and create a new district that everybody's going to be able to live with. And so I would just say that before the next speaker comes.
Thank you, Councilor Kennedy. Welcome next speaker to the podium. Name and address, please. We, by the way, do have a 5-minute rule, and I know we're going to adjourn at 6:30, and we'll quickly schedule a follow-up subcommittee meeting, and you'll all be notified, but just to make you all aware.
I'll try and be quick.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Steve Lehman. I'm at 213 Parkview Avenue. First of all, thank you for bringing the subcommittee together. It's useful to have folks talk in a little less formal setting, so appreciate that. Mr. Bakey, thank you for putting together a compromise there and proposing that. We're sorry to see you go off. Our loss is the university's gain, so good luck to you. You know, it's we've supported some kind of change in that area for some time. As Mr. Belanger pointed out, we've been struggling with this for a couple of years now, and have offered several compromises from our initial position. So I know the residents that are in our area up in Belvedere and up through that area are certainly willing and hopeful about compromises and generating some middle ground that works for us and works for the property owners in the commercial districts down there. I was struck by Mr. Plunkett's comment that there's a couple of hundred employees from Sage Bank in the Lowell area, and there are that plus more in terms of the residents that would be impacted by unchecked growth in that area. I was also struck by the comment that you made about analyzing before you buy, and which is a positive thing to do. It's what we did 30 years ago when we bought our house. It's what all the residents in our area did when they bought their houses. It's a common practice to analyze where you're going to live and make that decision. And what we want to do is make sure that as new people come in and analyze where they're going to live, that they're going to look at that neighborhood as a positive area, that the traffic congestion that has grown significantly in the 30 years that I've lived there won't continue to grow on what is a 2-lane road. We're hoping that new residents that come into that area continue to use the commercial properties that are down there the way that we do. Those are very valuable to us. We're trying to meet some middle ground that hits us both. So I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to find that middle ground. Mr. Kennedy, your point is well made, that if we all come and say we're intractable, nothing's ever going to happen. We have to all move a little bit to the middle. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Good evening.
My name is Steve Noneman, and I live at 518 Andover, and I just want to give a slightly different perspective. I've lived here for about 3 or 4 years, and my wife's family grew up here, multi-generational, and my brother-in-law is Dick Barrett, so I'm not speaking on his behalf. He can do that for himself.
Right.
And I'm not even going to speak specifically about the businesses in that area. However, when you use the word transitional, I think when you're looking for a compromise, which I think that's the direction it sounds like it's heading, it's really important. I've lived all over the country, and I think Lowell is one of the most unique and special cities I've ever lived in, and it's because of obviously the history and the development and the innovation and the adaptability, and I think the word adaptability is really critical. And I think that the thing is, all the residents in Belvedere, which is where my wife and I live, in that whole area, when they moved there, 38 was there, and that was intended as a major route, obviously, to Boston. And 35 miles is obviously a much shorter distance in 2014 than it was 30 years ago. And it's going to increasingly get shorter and shorter. And this area is going to get increasingly congested. So when you use the word transitionary or transitory, it's very important that when this decision is made, it's a very good decision. And I don't know how realistic it is to say a walkable area in that area, because it is tight. And it is walkable already. Those neighborhoods are beautiful, the roads are wide, the traffic coming off of 38 and Rogers Street doesn't move up into Belvedere very much, to be quite frank. And another key issue is when the development occurs more and more over time, I mean, the traffic through there, I mean, that's the major road into Lowell and outside of Lowell. And to me, if you look at that area, I don't think a tremendous amount of alterations have to occur. And I think one thing that has made Lowell special and adaptable over time is the unification, and especially a lot of the different immigrant groups of working together. And to me, I don't understand why the residential area and the business areas are so split on this issue. Because I've lived in a lot of areas that are much more conflicted than this pocket in space. I mean, this is not a very, it's not that condensed of a space. And if done well, I guess the last point I want to make is the key is Lowell in the development side relies on internal invested capital and external invested capital. And I think when you use the word transition, it's really critical that people know what the rules are when they're investing their capital. Because if you have venture capitalists coming in and investing capital in Lowell, and then the zoning changes because things are transitional quite often, it's going to scare the capital from coming in, and it's going to scare the internal capital from investing within the community. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone? Oh, Mr. Bakey?
Can I just add a very quick clarification to that? The word transitional in this case was my poor word choice, and it is not meant to be imply that the proposed zoning would be an interim zoning district. It was meant to be that this would be a transition between the obviously auto-oriented regional retail area on the street and the more neighborhood-oriented portion of the street. So it was more of a geographic transition than a time-based transition. But the point is very well taken, and perhaps we should find a better word that doesn't create the other connotation.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Steve Gendron. I live at 20 Clark Road in Lowell. I just wanted to agree with the prior speaker when he said that you can't see why much change has to take place in this zone. And this has always been about not changing it. This is not an effort to change it. This is an effort to keep it the same. And I think it became obvious to the neighborhood and to the planning board a couple years ago that under the current zoning, this section of Roger Street will change without a doubt. There are going to be efforts that go forth here to change it significantly and make it something that's probably going to be less desirable to the neighborhood. I'll be very brief. I've been involved with this for about as long as anybody, and I decided to continue to be involved with this neighborhood group because I think it's really important. Zoning is really important to the city. I'd make the case that it's the most important thing that we have to deal with as a city, and there are a lot of important things, because if we allow our neighborhoods to deteriorate, there's not going to be comfortable places for people to live, quality places for people to live. People will leave. Lowell will become a place where you live only if you don't have another choice. Then our tax base erodes, and the city goes right down the chute. So I think it's really important to try to protect the neighborhoods. Again, this is, I think everybody wants to keep this a thriving neighborhood business district. What the neighborhood doesn't want to see is a really busy retail, regional retail business that will cause the neighborhood to deteriorate. And I'll leave you with, the planning board, which I was formerly a member of, deliberated on this probably on 6 different occasions for many hours. And in the end, the proposal that they brought forth was approved unanimously by the planning board. So, I think I and everybody else am open to compromise. Councilor Belanger, I think you're absolutely right. That has to be the key word here. And the goal is really to keep it a thriving neighborhood business district that can work in concert with the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gendron. Good evening, Mr. Coffey.
Thank you. Richard Coffey, 331 Parkview Avenue. Gentlemen, look around. Look at this room. It's so different than the last time I came down here. Why? The city enhanced it. The city enhanced it with the new drapes, with the seal on the floor, new paint job, upholstery. It's an enhancement that the city did. And that's what we're here for. We're asking the city to enhance our situation, to enhance the city with a better zoning situation. I think what Adam brought in tonight, that is the direction to go in. I think a compromise that allows the existing businesses to feel more secure, but which pushes the development in the direction of a more walkable neighborhood in a small lot size, being protected and basically enhanced. And that's what we're doing. And so I hope that we can go in the direction of the proposal that Adam brought in tonight, and I hope everyone can get to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey. Anyone else like to speak? Good evening.
Good evening. Martha Barrett, 250 Nesmith Street, Lowell, Mass. My brother Richard owns Kilkenny Pub, and Richard could not be here this evening, and I know he has submitted a letter. I just know that his major concern is in various discussions, there had been indication that the opposite side of the street from Kilkenny Pub was going to be kept out and would remain regional retail. And a concern of the neighborhood appears to be the traffic and the growing traffic on 38, which is a major thoroughfare into the city from 495. And a big concern of Richard's is if one side of the street is changed into this compromise zoning and the other side is left as regional retail, how that overall is going to reduce the traffic for the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Celine Lehman. I live at 213 Parkview Avenue, and I just would like to reinforce Attorney Barrett's comment about the fact that I think we are starting over in where this change would affect. My concern has been the ability of the neighbors to walk down into the business zone. My son was raised here. He played ball in Shed Park. He learned how to drive, and many a scary time when I let him go down Parkview Avenue and try to turn onto 38. I completely agree that the issue is in part traffic, and that is a 2-lane road from 4 lanes. It's complicated. It can get more dangerous if we have more people driving in and out of drive-throughs. I am very pleased to see this kind of compromise on the table. I didn't like every single point on the proposal. I don't get to like every single point. Thank you very much for the effort in putting forth a compromise. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Good evening.
Hi. My name is Terry Dillingham. I live at 154 Parkview Avenue, and I too have been involved with this issue for many years now. And again, applaud the effort to come to a compromise. As we've stated before, our neighborhood association has made many compromises and really are trying to just create a change that works for everybody. I haven't lived here for 30 years. My husband did grow up here for his whole life, but I'm new to Lowell, and we agreed to come and raise our family. My husband really felt it important to give back to the community, and I bought in. We have 2 young kids. We spend a ton of time at Shed Park, but to be honest, when the specter of a Taco Bell open till 4 a.m. came up, it started to really question whether or not this was the right place and the city was going in the right direction for us. So to be honest, Lowell needs families like mine. They need young people who are energetic and putting a lot of time and investment into the community. But to be honest, if the city council is not going to support our neighborhood and the quality of life of our neighborhood, then we will move down the road to Andover if we have to, because I can't sacrifice the safety and well-being of my family. But I think we are moving in the right direction. I think from the neighborhood's perspective, or at least from my own, the point is not to be drawing from Route 495. It's to really keep the 495 traffic out of our neighborhood. We want to have businesses that support our neighborhood, but we're not interested in the traffic off of 495. So to the extent those regulations can create that sort of change in nature, that's what we're really looking for. And I think given the current character of the businesses there, that's what's there. And I think I agree, it's really, our interests are truly aligned in that a healthy, vibrant neighborhood supports these businesses better than anything and supports the city better than anything. And so it should be a win-win. And again, good luck to you, Adam. I appreciate all your efforts on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak at this point? Good evening. Let me just recognize Councilor Rourke is here this evening as well. Thank you, Councilor.
My name is Dominic Intravaya. I represent GIM Realty. We have property at 590 and 638 Roger Street. Now, with this proposal, you're going to have smaller stores. We have small stores as it is. There's 10 stores there that are small on our property. And as far as, I didn't get a notice, but let me get this across first. I didn't get a notice for this hearing, which isn't right. As a property owner there, I should have got notified of this hearing taking place. Whoever is responsible for that, make sure it don't happen in the future.
Right.
We'll say.
So noted. Thank you.
I got a copy here now. I
Right.
was just given a copy. But now, my property is too small for a big box store. It has small stores there now. And if they change it and make it a traditional mixed use, they're liable to somebody's liable to sell their property, not me, and put up a 4 to 6 story residential building. I don't think the abutters would want that in front of their property. So therefore, I say, no change, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else wishing to speak? Good evening.
Hi, my name is Ellen Collins, and I live at 212 Parkview Avenue in Lowell. I grew up in Lowell, and I'm back. I guess as a preliminary matter, I would like to thank Mr. Bakey for his service to the city, because over the past 10 years or more, things have really come along. And as head of the planning department, you deserve a lot of credit, in particular for the Jackson Mill development, which is beyond anything I could have conceived of when I left Lowell for college eons ago. So I say thank you and I wish you well. And I also thank you for your attention to this project. My family has lived in the neighborhood since 1963, and we've watched development, as has everybody else. And my primary concern is with, traffic and safety, as well as the fact that Route 38 is an entrance to the city of Lowell. And I know there's been a great deal of emphasis on economic development and, making people want to live in Lowell. And so, I kind of view this, I'm grateful that we're going to try the third way. I think that's actually the best way to come up with an entrance to Lowell that suits everybody's needs. And, if you're someone like me and you're inviting friends, say from Wellesley, to come to Lowell, it's like, optics count and you're given a hard time. The city undeservedly gets a bad reputation because it needs to pay more attention to things like this, as well as to crime. I mean, I grew up in Lowell, and having lived here again for the past 5 years, I know it's a wonderful place. It's underestimated by, many other people who live in many other places in Massachusetts. And I think, this, technically it's a zoning issue, but it also could be considered an economic development issue. A way to make the entrances to Lowell look good, like they're planned. well thought out. You know, the buildings are homogeneous. Like, for instance, I think residential buildings in the area in question on Rogers Street just don't fit. You know, commercial buildings are better taken care of. And I think also, having worked in the financial services community, I know that when people provide capital, you know, optics count. So one very important thing is to come up with a good name for this new zoning district. You know, the name should have retail in it. You know, that would reduce any reduction in value or, you know, perception, which is reality in the financial world. You know, whether it's local retail, you know, transitional retail, you know, that sounds iffy. You know, I think the idea is to come up with something concrete. I think we should start with the regional retail grid that's in the ordinance and, you know, carve back things from there that, you know, are detrimental to the neighborhoods that abut the questionable area. The one thing I would note is people tend to think of Belvedere, you know, as relatively homogeneous, but in fact, it isn't. And, you know, kind of by accident, I came by the 2010 US Census block groups, which indicate that, you know, 3 census block groups abut the area in question. And they have 3 very different sets of characteristics. For instance, the area that, you know, is south of Rogers Street has a median household income, the most recent available from citydata.com, of $45,476. The zoning, non-zoning, block group that goes up Fairmont Street to Mansur down to High Street, you know, it's a funny kind of carve out. That one has a median household income of $57,500. And then the area that, you know, my neighborhood, strictly speaking, that I think many of us on Parkview Avenue live there, you know, the median household income from, you know, Rogers Street to Hovey Street, Parkview on the west, probably like Clark Road on the east, is $91,389. So there's, and the areas north of what I would call B and C, north of where I live, have even higher median household incomes, you know, in the 100,000s. And I think whatever, you know, development or compromise we reach, we need to think about raising the value of everyone's property and promoting economic development. And I'm out of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Councilor Belanger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to say I'm very, very encouraged from what I've listened in and heard here this evening. I've seen a willingness to work here displayed this evening on both sides. The word compromise was used on more than one occasion from everybody. I think we all understand that we need to meet in the middle, and I saw that here tonight. So I think we made a giant step here this evening. We didn't have the ultimate answers here this evening, and that's to be expected. But going into future dialogues, I think we're off to a very positive step, because you all lived in harmony there for so many years. What happened? But I assure you, through just a few short meetings, I think we're going to reach that common ground. I'm very confident of that. So I do look forward to future meetings, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Belanger. With that, I know that Mrs. Barrett would like to speak, but what I'd like to do is hold it over until The next meeting, because we do have a city council meeting that's starting at 6. Yes, Councilor Mercia.
Mr. Chairman, where's that paper that went around the room? Did we have
some-
it somewhere?
It was,
Okay.
thank you. And we will mail that report and notices to this list going forward. I know that most of you did get a copy of the December 13th memo. We will do our best to make sure that everyone is contacted for the next meeting. With that said, I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the report as a report of progress
So moved.
by Councilor Kennedy, seconded by Councilor Belanger. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, vote. The subcommittee stands adjourned, and we will get back in touch with everybody. We'll probably meet within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.